I never thought the day would come when my own daughter would push me out into the cold. I never imagined that the man she chose as her husband would strip away what little dignity I had left. But what they didn't know was that I still had one final card to play, and when I played it, everything changed. Before I tell you everything, comment below where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. My name is Margaret. I'm 58 years old. All my life, I believed in something called unconditional love, especially within family. Every meal I cooked, every holiday I planned, every single dollar I saved. It was all for my husband, David, and for our daughter, Amanda. When David passed from cancer, the world beneath me collapsed. But I told myself I still had Amanda. I still had the daughter I had sacrificed everything for. We once had a little house in Cedar Park, just north of Austin. Every wall in that place had our fingerprints on it. We painted the rooms ourselves. We planted roses by the front steps. But after David died, those walls became a prison of memories. I sold it. I thought, if I let go of the house, maybe I could let go of the grief too. Amanda told me to move in with her and her husband. I believed her when she said it would help. But the moment I stepped into their apartment, I felt Chad's eyes cutting through me like shards of glass. He barely looked up from his phone. No welcome, no warmth, just a quick nod and back to his screen. I tried not to be a burden. I stayed in the small back room. I cooked. I cleaned. I ran errands. I wanted to prove I was still useful, that I wasn't dead weight. But Chad's eyes told another story. I was a splinter under his skin. He rolled his eyes when I asked simple questions. He changed the channel while I was mid-show. Once, I heard him mutter under his breath as he walked by me in the hall. Freeloader. Amanda brushed it off. He's just stressed, Mom. Work's been rough. I swallowed the shame. I kept quiet. Because that's what mothers do, right? But that night, that one dinner, it shattered the last illusion. I had made chicken pot pie Chad's favorite. Amanda was scrolling on her phone. Chad was sipping beer, eyes glazed. The silence was thick, pressing down like a weight. And then Chad looked up. His words cut sharper than any knife. Maybe it's time we stop pretending this is temporary. We're not a charity. My breath caught. My heart pounded. I asked softly, "What do you mean?" He smirked. "I mean, how long is this supposed to go on? You're not working. You're not contributing. We didn't sign up for extra mouths to feed. Extra mouth." That's what I had become. I turned to Amanda, desperate for her voice, for her to fight for me. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Maybe it's best," she mumbled, "if you find something more stable, for everyone's sake." Her words, gentle on the surface, hit harder than Chad's cruelty. It wasn't just him rejecting me. It was her silence, her agreement. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I stood up, walked to my room, and began to pack. 2 suitcases. That's all my life amounted to. I didn't cry as I folded my clothes. I didn't cry as I zipped the bags. The tears came later when the front door closed behind me and no one followed. I stepped out into the night air. The wind stung my face, biting through my coat. I sat on the curb outside their building, the glow of street lamps smearing across the pavement. My phone battery was dead. My heart felt the same. And I thought to myself, this is what it feels like to be erased. The night I left Amanda's apartment, I checked into a motel. The kind of place where the wallpaper peels, the carpet smells faintly of cigarettes, and the vending machine eats your change. It wasn't home. It wasn't even shelter. It was just somewhere to exist. I lay on the stiff mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, asking myself over and over, how did it come to this? How could I give so much of my life to my family, only to be thrown away like trash? The next morning, I sent Amanda a message. "I understand. I love you. Always." No reply. A week later, another text. Then another. On her birthday, I sent a photo of the cake I baked alone. Nothing. Silence. Her silence was louder than Chad's insults. I tried to rebuild. I went out, filled applications at grocery stores, diners, even front desks of cheap motels. Each time the manager skimmed my form, their eyes softened in that pitying way. "You're overqualified." Or worse, "You're not the right fit." Those words were just polite ways of saying, "You're too old. You're too tired. "You're not what we want anymore." I walked back to my motel room with blistered feet and an empty stomach. I sat on the floor surrounded by the little I owned, 2 suitcases and 1 cardboard box of keepsakes I had grabbed in a rush. Inside were old family photos, a few letters, and at the very bottom, something I had forgotten was even there. A small, leather-bound book. My mother's diary. At first, I almost put it back. The leather was cracked, the spine nearly broken. It smelled faintly of dust and years. But something made me open it. Her handwriting leapt off the page, tight loops, neat lines, the same script she used when she wrote me little notes for my lunchbox in grade school. At first, it was ordinary. Grocery prices, complaints about the Texas heat, church gossip. But then, an entry dated June. I froze as I read. "He came again today. He says he wishes things were different, that he wishes I could be his wife. But he has a family, a business, a reputation to protect. Margaret must never know. She must never know she was born out of mistake and desire. I just pray one day she'll understand how much I loved her." My hands shook. My chest tightened. I flipped further. More entries. More meetings. More secrets. A name appeared, always abbreviated, HJS. And then, another entry, February. He promised me that if anything happened to him, Margaret would have something, a trust, arrangements with his lawyer, Mr. Goldstein. He said my daughter would never be left with nothing. I dropped the diary onto the bed. Goldstein. That name. It echoed in my head. I remembered seeing it years ago, in some old paperwork. A lawyer's letterhead tucked in with Mom's bills. Could it be real? Or was this the desperate rambling of a lonely woman? I couldn't sleep. All night, I lay awake with the diary pressed to my chest, wondering if my entire life had been built on a lie. The next morning, I sat in the motel's business center, just 2 ancient computers in the corner by the ice machine. I typed with trembling fingers. Leonard Goldstein, estate lawyer, Dallas. And there he was, still listed, though retired. An office number. I couldn't bring myself to call. My voice would shake too much. Instead, I wrote him a letter. A real, handwritten letter, like the ones my mother used to write. I told him who I was, who she was, and I begged for a conversation. 2 weeks passed. 2 long, heavy weeks of stale motel air, thin vending machine dinners, and silence from Amanda. Then, one morning, the phone at the front desk rang for me. "Ma'am, a Mr. Goldstein is on the line." My heart nearly stopped. His voice was old, cracked, but kind. When I mentioned my mother's name, there was a pause. Then he whispered, "I always wondered if you'd reach out someday. There's something you need to see." The next day, I boarded a Greyhound bus to Dallas. Suitcase half packed, half convinced I was walking into a scam. But when I stepped into his office lined with dusty books, old certificates on the wall, I knew it was real. This man wasn't a con artist. He was history, and he was holding mine in his hands. He slid a yellowed envelope across the desk, addressed in elegant script, "To my daughter, Margaret Louise." The name hit me like a punch. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter from Harold James Sterling, the founder of Sterling Energy, a man I'd only ever seen in newspapers, the kind of man who had oil wells, private planes, and a family of his own. In the letter, he confessed everything. The affair, the regret, the love he couldn't show, and the promise if he died, a portion of his assets would be hidden away, delivered to me through Goldstein. Goldstein then pushed a folder toward me. Bank accounts, en investment portfolio, property titles, the total value, just over $1 million. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. My voice broke. "This is real?" He nodded. "It always was. It's yours." I didn't scream. I didn't laugh. I just sat there, silent tears soaking the page, letting the truth wash over me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. For the first time in years, I wasn't a burden. I was chosen. I was seen. That night, back in the motel, I lay awake again. But this time, I was smiling. They thought I was finished. They thought I was powerless. But they had no idea. I wasn't broken. I was just getting started. When I left Goldstein's office, I wasn't the same woman who had walked in. Something inside me had shifted. For months, I had been surviving. Now, for the first time, I was planning. I checked out of the motel. No more cigarette-stained sheets. No more vending machine dinners. I rented a small apartment on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just mine. And with the folder clutched against my chest, bank accounts, investments, property deeds I knew. I wasn't poor anymore. I wasn't powerless. I had options. But I didn't rush. I didn't spend. I studied. Every morning, I sat at the old wooden desk in my apartment, a pot of coffee at my side, my mother's diary on one corner, Goldstein's folder on the other. I opened YouTube, not to watch recipes or music videos like I used to, but lectures, seminars, investing for beginners. Real Estate 101. How to form an LLC. I filled notebooks with scribbled notes until my hand ached. For the first time since David died, my brain felt alive again. The world started to look different. When I walked down Main Street, I no longer just saw shops and buildings. I saw opportunities. When I read the paper, the real estate listings felt like codes waiting to be cracked. And then, one evening, I saw it, buried in the classifieds. For sale, 12-unit residential building, Central Austin, excellent location. My heart skipped. I read the address twice, then a third time. It was their building, Amanda and Chad's, the very place where they had told me I was an extra mouth. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Was this fate? Or just cruel coincidence? I folded the paper, slid it under my pillow, and lay awake all night. By sunrise, I knew. This wasn't chance. This was my card. I didn't walk into that sale with my name. I wasn't foolish. I created a new identity, an LLC with a clean name that gave nothing away. Sterling Properties. It felt poetic, using part of my true father's name, as if he was finally giving me the strength he never could in life. The negotiations were quiet, clinical. I sat across from men in suits who thought I was just another silent old widow with a lawyer at her side. They underestimated me, and I let them. When the papers were signed, I felt a rush like nothing else. The building was mine. The walls that had once rejected me now belonged to me. But I didn't move in. Not yet. That would be too obvious. Too soon. I wanted Chad to feel the walls closing in long before he ever saw my face. The first step, rent adjustments. Across the board, every tenant received a polite letter. Rents would triple effective next quarter. Some grumbled, some left, some paid. But I wasn't after them. I was after two names on the list. Apartment 4B, Amanda Thornfield, Chad Thornfield. When Chad got the letter, I imagined his face turning red, his voice rising. I pictured Amanda's tears, her pleading. I pictured him storming through their kitchen, shouting at bills and broken budgets. I didn't need to be there to enjoy it. I had already won the first round, and I stayed silent. I didn't answer their calls to the property manager. I didn't reply to Amanda's hesitant email. "Mom, are you okay? Do you know what's happening with our landlord?" For once, silence was my weapon. Every unanswered word made them more desperate. At night, I would drive by the building, park across the street, lights flickering through their window blinds, their shadows pacing, arguing. I sat there with the engine off, watching quietly, my hands steady on the wheel. No shouting from me, no begging, no tears, just control. But it wasn't only revenge. With the increased rents, I repaired the hallways. I fixed the leaky pipes. I had the walls repainted, the roof reinforced. For the other tenants, life got better. I wasn't destroying. I was rebuilding. And Chad's money was paying for it. Still, part of me ached. Every time I thought of Amanda, my heart cracked. She was my little girl. She had sat on my lap while I read her bedtime stories. She had worn the dress I sewed for her first prom. And now, she was trapped in Chad's shadow, too afraid to stand beside me. Sometimes, I wondered if I was punishing her as much as him. Sometimes, the guilt gnawed at me. But then I remembered her voice at that dinner table. "Maybe it's best if you find something more stable." Her silence had cut deeper than his cruelty. And so, I pressed forward. One evening, as I was going through new tenant applications, the buzzer rang in my apartment. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Amanda stood there. Eyes red, cheeks pale, hands shaking. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "Mum, I need your help." When I opened the door and saw Amanda standing there, I almost didn't recognize her. Her shoulders were hunched. Her hands trembled as if even ringing the bell had taken everything she had left. Her eyes, my daughter's eyes, were swollen red from crying. For a moment, I froze. Part of me wanted to pull her into my arms, hold her the way I did when she was little, whisper that everything would be okay. But another part of me remembered that dinner table, remembered her silence, her betrayal. So I stood still, and I waited for her to speak. "Mom," her voice cracked. "Can we talk?" I didn't invite her in. Not yet. I just stepped aside. She slipped past me into the small apartment, looking around as if it belonged to a stranger. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where I studied real estate law and business contracts, the same table where I became someone new. She started with excuses. "Chad's under a lot of stress. Work hasn't been steady. He's not himself lately." I let her talk. I didn't interrupt. I just folded my hands and listened. Then came the pleading. "The rent increase. It's impossible for us. I've been stretching every paycheck, cutting back on groceries. We can't keep up." Her voice broke again. "We might lose the apartment." I leaned forward, my eyes steady on hers. And finally, I spoke. "Do you remember the night you told me to leave? The night you chose his voice over mine?" Her face crumpled. "Mom, No." My voice was calm, but sharp. "You didn't say the words, Amanda. You didn't throw me out. But your silence did the work for him." She lowered her head. Tears slipped down her cheeks. And for the first time, I saw it shame, real shame. I wish I could say I softened then, that I forgave her in that moment. But I didn't. The wound was too fresh, the memory too raw. Instead, I let the silence hang between us. The same silence that had once been my prison, now my weapon. That night, after she left, I sat alone at the same table. My hands shook, but not from weakness. From power. Because Amanda had come to me, not the other way around. For once, she needed me more than I needed her. Meanwhile, Chad was unraveling. Neighbors whispered about the shouting matches in 4B, the slammed doors, the broken glass. At night, when I parked across the street, I could see his silhouette pacing like a caged animal, yelling, pointing. Amanda, shrinking smaller and smaller under his shadow. He was losing control. And men like Chad? They don't know how to live without control. Then came the threats. Through the property manager, through angry voicemails left at the office, Chad's voice came roaring. "This rent hike is illegal. I'll find out who owns this building. Whoever you are, you'll regret messing with me." I listened to those recordings in the quiet of my living room, sipping tea, a small smile on my lips, because he had no idea. The person he was threatening was the woman he had already discarded. One evening, Amanda returned. This time, she didn't knock timidly. She barged in, eyes wide, fear etched into every line of her face. "Mom, he's losing it. He's not sleeping. He's drinking more. He keeps saying he'll get us out of this, but..." Her voice shook. "I don't know how much longer I can take it." I reached across the table, placing my hand gently over hers. For the first time in months, I touched my daughter. And I spoke the truth she had avoided for too long. "Amanda, you think Chad is your shield, but he's your cage. And the night you chose him over me, you locked yourself inside it." Her tears fell fast now, splashing onto the table. "Mom, I was scared. I didn't want to fight him. I thought if I stayed quiet, things would be easier." I squeezed her hand. Easier for who? She didn't answer, because she knew. That night ended without resolution. She left with more questions than answers. But something in her had shifted. I could see it in her eyes. The cracks in her loyalty to Chad were widening. And I knew, eventually, she would have to choose. But make no mistake, I wasn't rushing to save her. Not yet. She had to feel the full weight of the life she had chosen. She had to break free herself. As for me, I would keep watching, keep waiting, keep tightening the noose around Chad's pride until it finally snapped. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers. And in those whispers, the guilty hear the loudest truth. The voicemails kept coming, each one angrier than the last. Chad's voice grew louder, his threats more desperate. "I'll sue you. You can't do this to me. You picked the wrong family to mess with." But the truth? I didn't pick his family. He picked me when he called me an extra mouth. Every time I pressed play, I smiled. Because every shout, every curse, every threat was proof. Proof that my silence was working. Proof that the walls were closing in. Amanda's visits became more frequent. She stopped making excuses for him. She started showing fear. One evening, she showed up with bruises on her arm. When I reached for it, she pulled away quickly, whispering, "I fell." But I knew. I've known the truth behind that kind of silence my whole life. She sat at my table, sipping tea with trembling hands. "Mom," she whispered, "I don't know how much longer I can stay." I looked her in the eyes. And for the first time, I didn't see my little girl. I saw a woman trapped in a cage she had helped build. Meanwhile, Chad's spiral deepened. The neighbors called the property office, complaining of noise, shouting, broken glass. Reports of late-night parties that ended in fights. Bills stacking up. Credit cards maxed. His pride couldn't take the hit of losing control. And so, he tried to claw it back the only way he knew how, by breaking the people closest to him. But I wasn't just watching. I was tightening the strings. The next step? Renovations. I sent contractors into the building, new paint, new plumbing, upgraded appliances. Except one apartment, 4B, Amanda and Chad's. The hallway outside their door gleamed with fresh paint. The apartment next door had a brand new dishwasher. But their unit? I left it untouched. Every crack in the wall, every squeaky floorboard, every broken hinge. I let it rot, because nothing eats at a man like Chad more than watching everyone else thrive while he falls apart. One afternoon, the contractors worked late. I stayed nearby, reviewing paperwork. And that's when I heard it. Through the thin apartment walls came the sound of shouting. Chad's voice, booming, furious. Amanda's, softer, breaking. A crash like a plate shattering. Then silence. I clenched my fists, my chest tightening. Part of me wanted to storm in, to pull her out, to scream at him for what he was doing. But I didn't. Not yet. Because if I moved too soon, he'd still think he had power. And I needed him powerless. Later that week, Amanda knocked on my door again. Her face pale, her hands clutching a small purse like it was a lifeline. "Mom," she whispered, "can I stay here tonight?" I let her in. I made up the couch. She curled under the blanket like a child again, her shoulders trembling. In the darkness, she spoke. "He's changed, Mom. He's not the man I married." Her voice broke. But maybe he always was. And I just refused to see it. I sat beside her, brushing her hair back from her damp cheeks. "You stayed quiet to keep the peace," I told her softly. "But silence doesn't keep peace, Amanda. It keeps chains." The next morning, she was gone. Back to 4B. Back to Chad. Because that's how cages work. Even when the door is open, it takes time to walk out. But while Amanda wavered, I moved forward. I called the bank. I reviewed the mortgage. And I found something Chad hadn't seen coming. A balloon payment, due in 90 days. Large enough to crush him if he couldn't cover it. And I made sure he couldn't. Every extension denied. Every loophole closed. Every favor he tried to call in evaporated. Because I was there first. One evening, I parked across the street, watching from the shadows. Through their window, I saw him raging papers scattered across the table, bills in his fist, Amanda shrinking into the corner. His world was collapsing, and he had no idea I was the one pulling the threads. But this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about Amanda, about showing her that silence wasn't strength. That choosing him over me had cost her everything, but she still had a choice left. And when the time came, she would need to make it. As for me, I was no longer the invisible widow who had left that dinner table in tears. I was the landlord, the investor, the woman with power in her silence. And every day, Chad's cage grew smaller. Until one day, Amanda would see the truth for herself. Because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes, justice is the quiet tightening of ropes. Until the guilty can no longer breathe. The letter from the bank hit like a hammer. I know, because I was the one who made sure it landed. 90 days. That's all Chad had left before the balloon payment crushed him. And the truth? He didn't have 90 days of sanity left in him. The neighbors noticed first. Late night shouting, doors slamming, Amanda's voice muffled, pleading. I would drive by and see the blinds shaking as Chad stormed from room to room. The once proud man who laughed at me, who called me an extra mouth, was now unraveling thread by thread. And Amanda? She was unraveling with him. One night, she came to my door again, her face pale, her lip trembling. This time, she didn't ask for tea. She didn't sit at the table. She collapsed into my arms and sobbed. "Mom, I can't do this anymore. He's scaring me." Her voice broke as she whispered. "He keeps talking to himself. He says someone's out to get him. He spends hours on the computer searching property records. He knows something's wrong, but he can't find it." I closed my eyes, holding her tighter, because the truth was, he was right. Someone was out to get him, and that someone was me. Amanda stayed that night. For the first time, she didn't run back the next morning. She lingered. She cooked breakfast with me in the tiny kitchen, just like she used to when she was a girl. For a moment, it almost felt like I had my daughter back. But then her phone buzzed. Chad. Her hands shook as she read his messages. "Where are you? Why aren't you home? Answer me, Amanda." Her face drained of color. "Mom, if I don't go back, he'll come here." I put my hand over hers, then let him, but she couldn't. Not yet. That evening, I watched from my window as she walked back across the street, her head low, her shoulders heavy, like a prisoner walking back into her cell. And I knew her breaking point was near, but she had to reach it herself. Chad's paranoia grew. He stormed into the property office, demanding to know who the landlord was. When the manager refused, he threatened lawsuits, violence, anything. I got the report the next day. Tenant 4B is becoming aggressive, unsafe. I smiled, because desperation was eating him alive faster than I ever could. Still, I wasn't careless. I prepared. I gathered every document: leases, payment histories, the mortgage default. I filed everything neatly in a folder, ready for the day I would step forward. Because when justice came, I wanted it to be undeniable. Amanda returned a week later. This time, she didn't knock. She burst into my apartment, shaking, eyes wild. "Mom, he knows. He knows something's happening with the building. He said he'll burn it down before he lets anyone take it from him." Her words sent a chill through me, because with men like Chad, those weren't just empty threats. They were promises. I sat her down, forcing her to look at me. "Amanda, listen to me. You don't owe him your silence anymore. You don't owe him your loyalty. The only thing you owe is to yourself, to survive." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "But I chose him over you. I let him push you out." I brushed her hair back, the way I used to when she was small. "Yes, you did. But you can choose differently now." For the first time, I saw a spark in her eyes. Not fear, not shame, but défiance. It was faint, but it was there. Meanwhile, Chad's world collapsed. Creditors called day and night. The bank refused extensions. Neighbors avoided him in the hallways. And every time he thought he had a lead, some clue to the shadow ruining him, it slipped through his fingers. Because I had already closed every door. The night before the bank's deadline, I stood at my window again. Across the street, lights flickered in 4B. I saw his shadow pacing. I saw Amanda sitting still, head bowed, silent. And I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, it ends." The next morning, I received the call. The bank was moving forward. The mortgage was in default. Legal action would follow. Chad Thornfield was officially finished. But this wasn't just about paperwork. This wasn't just about numbers. This was about truth. And truth needed an audience. So I made the call. A residents' meeting. Mandatory. Every tenant. Every voice. Every witness. Including Chad. Including Amanda. Because justice wasn't just about watching him fall. It was about letting everyone see who he truly was. And who I had become. As I hung up the phone, I took a deep breath. For months, I had been silent. Invisible. Dismissed as an extra mouth. But tomorrow, I would walk into that room as something else entirely. Not a burden. Not a victim. But the owner. The one pulling the strings all along. And when I revealed the truth, Chad's cage would collapse for good. The notice went out on bright yellow paper. Mandatory residents meeting. Community room, 6 p.m. I knew Chad would show up. Men like him can't resist a fight. He would walk in ready to argue, ready to dominate, ready to take back control. But this time, the room wasn't his to control. It was mine. The community room was small, with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and metal chairs scraped across the linoleum floor. One by one, Tenants filed in, neighbors who had watched the shouting matches in 4B, who had complained about the noise, who had seen Amanda's pale face in the hallway. And then the door slammed open. Chad stormed in. Amanda trailed behind him, eyes downcast, like a shadow clinging to his rage. He scanned the room, his voice loud before he even sat down. "All right, who's behind this? Who's been raising rents, cutting deals, screwing with me? Whoever it is, you picked the wrong man to mess with." Whispers rippled through the room. All eyes turned to me. I stood slowly, not trembling, not afraid. For the first time in months, I felt taller than I ever had in my life. "Mr. Thornfield," I said calmly, "you wanted to know who your landlord is? You're looking at her." The silence that followed was thick. Then, like thunder, came Chad's laugh. "You?" he scoffed, shaking his head. "You expect me to believe this? You're a joke. You're nothing. You're a parasite we threw out of our home." But the folder in my hands wasn't a joke. I laid the documents on the table. Deeds, mortgage records, lease agreements, all bearing one name. Mine. The room erupted in murmurs. Neighbors leaned forward, eyes wide. Amanda's head snapped up, her face pale with shock. Chad lunged forward, snatching at the papers. "This is fake. You think a piece of paper changes anything?" But I didn't flinch. "Those pieces of paper own the roof over your head," I said evenly. "And when the bank comes tomorrow for the payment you can't make, you'll have nothing left. Nothing." For the first time, his face lost its color. The bravado cracked. He glanced at Amanda, expecting her to stand beside him. But she didn't. I turned to her. "My daughter," I said softly, though the whole room could hear. "The night you told me to leave, I thought I had lost you forever. But you didn't just lose me that night. You lost yourself. Because silence is not peace, it's surrender." Amanda's lips trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. And then, finally, she spoke. "Chad, stop." Her voice was small but steady. "Hespun on her." "What did you say?" She swallowed hard, then louder. "Stop. This isn't Mom's fault. This is yours." The room went silent. You could hear the hum of the lights overhead, the ticking of the old wall clock. Chad's face twisted, rage boiling just beneath his skin. "You ungrateful." But Amanda stood taller now, her shoulders squaring, her voice clear. "You're not the man I married. You're not the man I thought you were. You're the reason we're losing everything." It was the moment I had waited for. Not revenge, not money, but my daughter's voice finally breaking free. Chad lashed out, pointing at me, shouting, "She's manipulating you. She's always been weak, a leech, dragging us down." But no one believed him anymore. Not the tenants, not Amanda, and not me, because the truth wasn't in his words. It was in his desperation, and everyone could see it. I gathered the papers, sliding them back into the folder. Then I stood, calm and steady. "This meeting is over. The building is mine. The decision is final." I walked past Chad as if he were nothing more than air. For once, he didn't stop me. For once, he had no power left to take. When I reached the door, I turned back. Amanda was still standing in the center of the room, tears glistening on her cheeks. But she wasn't shrinking anymore. She wasn't silent. And when her eyes met mine, I saw it. Recognition. Apology. Strength. She had finally chosen. Outside, the evening air felt cool against my skin. I stood on the sidewalk, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and fire. For months, I had been invisible. But in that room, I had revealed the truth. Not just to Chad, not just to Amanda, but to myself. I wasn't weak. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't an extra mouth. I was Margaret, and my silence had become my loudest justice. The day after the residents' meeting, Chad was gone. Not in the sense of leaving gracefully. No. Men like Chad don't walk away quietly. They crash. They burn. The bank came first. Default. No payment. No extensions. The mortgage collapsed under his name like a house of cards. Then came the job. His company cut him loose, citing unprofessional behavior. Truth was, his reputation had already been shredded by his tantrums, his threats, his unraveling pride. And finally, the neighbors. They had seen too much. He was no longer the man who strutted down the hall with his chest puffed out. He was the man whispered about in corners. The man no one trusted. Amanda showed up at my apartment a week later. No makeup, no excuses. Just her. She stood in the doorway, clutching a small suitcase. Not the kind you pack for a weekend trip. The kind you pack when you know you're never going back. "Mom," she whispered, "I left him." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words I had prayed to hear were finally real. I opened my arms, and for the first time since the night she betrayed me, I held my daughter again. This time, not in anger, not in silence, but in forgiveness. It didn't happen all at once. Rebuilding trust never does. There were awkward dinners, long pauses, tears that came out of nowhere, but slowly we began to talk, really talk, about the years I had given, about the silence she had chosen, about the pain we had both carried alone. And in those conversations, something grew back, not the same as before, something stronger, something honest. As for Chad, his spiral didn't stop. The last I heard, he tried to file a lawsuit against Sterling Properties. It went nowhere. You can't sue paper when the paper has your own signature on it. Eventually, he moved out. The last time I saw him, he was shoving garbage bags of clothes into the back of a dented car, shouting into his phone. No one was listening. Not even Amanda. That was the real punishment. Not the money. Not the eviction. But the silence that followed him wherever he went. And me? I had a choice to make. I could have kept the building. I could have kept pulling strings, watching every tenant dance on the rent he paid. But I didn't need it anymore. The power wasn't in the property. The power was in me. So I sold it. At a profit. Enough to live comfortably. Enough to help Amanda start over. Enough to give to charities for women like me, mothers, widows, women discarded and silenced, left with nowhere to go. The day the papers closed, I walked through the building one last time. Fresh paint. New plumbing. Stronger walls. It was better than when I had taken it. I left it better than I found it. That was the kind of justice I wanted to leave behind. Amanda and I moved into a small house just outside town. Not fancy. Not grand. But filled with sunlight. With peace. With a sense of home. Some evenings, we sit on the porch, sipping tea, watching the sky change colors. We don't talk about Chad much anymore. He's a ghost neither of us needs. Instead, we talk about the future. About the things we can build now, not the things we lost. And sometimes, late at night, I take out my mother's diary. I trace the ink with my fingertips. The words of a woman who once felt invisible, who once stayed silent. And I whisper to her, "You gave me this strength. You gave me this chance. And I used it." If you're listening to my story right now, maybe you felt invisible too. Maybe someone told you that you were a burden, an extra mouth. Maybe you've stayed quiet to keep the peace. But let me tell you, silence isn't peace. Silence is surrender. And when you finally break it, when you finally take back your voice, you'll find a strength you never knew you had. Because I did. And I'm standing here to tell you, it's never too late. So, to the daughter who betrayed me and then found her way back, to the man who thought he could silence me and lost everything instead, to the mother who left me her secrets in a diary and gave me back my life, I say this: I forgive. Not for them. For me. Because forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing peace over chains. And if my story reaches just one person tonight, someone sitting alone, wondering if they matter, know this: you do. You are not invisible. You are not a burden. And your silence does not define you. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments, have you ever felt invisible in your own family? And where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next story. And please, share this video with someone who needs to hear they are not alone. Asterisk.